The lineup for the 2025 edition of the Boston Calling Music Festival is announced, and the lineup is pretty solid. Jane's Addiction go into the studio without frontman Perry Farrell, and Morrison Hotel goes down in flames. All this and more, the latest rock music news on this edition of the Rock News Roundup Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rock News Roundup Podcast here on the Nick Chino Music Channel on YouTube. I am your host, Mr. Nick Chino. Mic's on, devil horns up. Welcome back to the podcast where we talk about the latest and greatest in rock music news. This is the first episode of 2025, so welcome back. Actually, this is only the third episode of the show in general. So we're just getting started for 2025. So thank you for joining me on this inaugural edition for the year. Not really a huge week in music of rock music news. I think we're still starting to get warmed up, but there are a couple of topics that we're going to talk about on this edition of the show, including Jane's Addiction going into the studio without Perry Farrell after all the drama that band went through at the tail end of 2024. Also, the Morrison Hotel, the site of the famous Doors album cover, burns down. Fortunately, nobody was hurt in that, but we have lost another great rock music landmark. Also going to talk about this week's new releases. There are a couple of new releases coming out for New Music Friday this week, including Franz Ferdinand, Ringo Starr, and Tremonti. We'll talk about that. And we're also going to talk about the Boston Calling lineup that was announced for 2025 in just a minute. But if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you like what I'm doing here on the channel, on the podcast, I'd really, really appreciate that. If you're only listening to the audio only version of the podcast, this is available as an audio only podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to give us a rating and review on those platforms if you're listening to the audio only version. And if you're inclined, you can follow me on social media across platforms at Nick Chino Music. Also, if you're checking out the YouTube channel, a couple of new videos that are up there right now. One of them being my 2025 rock music preview. We are into the new year, and although we don't have a complete picture of all the rock music releases that are going to be coming out in 2025, we do have a bunch of really good ones that are already on the schedule for the next couple of months. That's including like new Coheed and Cambria, LS Dunes, Manic Street Preachers, Doves, so many big releases on deck for 2025. So you can check out that video right now on the channel. And also, if you missed it, my best of list for 2024 are up on the channel right now. My top 10 best rock tracks of 2024 and my top 10 best rock albums of 2024. Those videos are up now on the channel if you're so inclined to check those out. But let's get into it with the latest rock music headlines over the last little bit. And the first one I want to get to is the Boston Calling 2025 lineup has been announced for this year. It's going to be taking place May the 23rd to the 25th at the Harvard Athletic Complex in Boston. I've been to Boston before. It was a long time ago. Love Boston. Great town. Tickets for this festival go on sale tomorrow. I'm recording this on Tuesday, January the 7th. They go on sale Wednesday, January the 8th. But you know what? Even though I probably won't be going down to this festival myself, I thought I would just pop up this lineup here and just take a look at the lineup and see kind of what bands I think would be highlights of going to check out at the Boston Calling Music Festival for the purposes of rock music, because that isn't generally what I talk about here on the channel. But I think in general, the festival lineups really aren't what they used to be. I think, especially here in Canada, they aren't what they used to be. But even down in the States, even though some of these festivals get a lot of big names, there are a lot of more up and coming artists that do these kind of things, which is fine. They're always worthy to go see at the festivals, but maybe not as attention or crowd drawing as some of the bigger names. But let's take a look at this Boston Calling Music Festival lineup for the Friday, May the 23rd. This looks more geared towards country music fans. There's not really a ton here that I would go see myself, but Luke Combs, Megan Maroney, Sheryl Crow would be really cool. I'd love to see Sheryl Crow, as well as some rap and R&B on there as well. T-Pain, TLC, but they're not really too familiar with some of the other names on the list for the Friday of the Boston Calling Music Festival. I just want to say, actually, thank you to the graphic designer for the Boston Calling Music Festival for not making this like an eye chart like the Coachella festival posters that they do, where each band name gets successively smaller as you go through, and you're really testing your eyesight trying to read all the different bands on the poster. So kudos and thank you to the graphic designer for Boston Calling for making this very legible for all of us music fans. And then looking at the Saturday lineup, this to me is the one that I think I would rather, I'd go see. You got Fall Out Boy. I'm a Fall Out Boy fan. They got a lot of good hits. I think it would be enjoyable to see them. Avril Lavigne, a nice Canadian girl. I love my fellow Canadians. Avril Lavigne, maybe not so much, even though I'm sure she puts on a good show. But then some of the other names on here, you know what? I think it's a crime to have the Black Crowes in the second line of this poster. The Black Crowes deserve to be the main headliner, in my opinion. But then we have Cage the Elephant, who's going to be opening up for Oasis for the North American tour later this year. All Time Low, that's for the pop punk fans. So a lot more for the pop punk and the pop rock fans on the Saturday night. You got Fall Out Boy, you got Avril Lavigne, Cage the Elephant, James Bay, The Maine, Valley, who I believe are Canadian as well, and then some other names on there that I'm not so familiar with. And then taking a look at the Sunday, I think this is more for the hippies, or maybe for the hipsters out there. You got Dave Matthews Band headlining the Sunday night along with Vampire Weekend. I think that's a good solid 1-2 punch there. Sublime, Public Enemy, if you're into for the hip hop fans as well. So not just for the hipsters, but for the hip hop fans as well. Tom Morello playing a solo set. Spin Doctors, if you love your 90s rock. And then I love this band name, okay? I'm a huge Back to the Future fan, guys. I don't know if you can really see it, but behind me I have a display case full of DeLoreans here, because I'm a huge Back to the Future fan. So knowing that this band's name is I Don't Know How, But They Found Me, the classic Doc Brown line from the first Back to the Future film, that is absolutely fantastic. I know nothing about their music, but I love them already based on their names. So I think that's a solid night for the third night of Boston Calling as well. But if I was going to buy a ticket, I think maybe buying a ticket for the entire weekend would probably bankrupt most people. So if I was going to pick one band or one night that I would go see at Boston Calling, I think I would go with night number 2, because I'm a huge Black Crowes fan, so I'd love to see them. And then around that, other bands that I enjoy, Cage the Elephant, Fall Out Boy, All Time Low would be cool. The thing is about any of these festivals, it's always a combination of those 3 nights that you're going to want to go, because I would love to see Sublime with Bradley Knowles' son on lead vocals. I'd love to see Tom Morello. Hey, maybe even Vampire Weekend, maybe even Dave Matthews Band, but I know these things got to be spread out over the various days of the festival. But overall, a really solid lineup for the Boston Calling Music Festival that's going to be happening May 2025. So it's coming up very, very soon. 5 months from now, it's going to be happening at the Harvard Athletic Complex in Boston. I'm not going to be going. I'm up here in Canada. Probably won't be going to Boston Calling, but if you are an American fan, if you live down in that part of the world, the tickets will be going on sale for the pre-sale for that festival on January the 8th. And good luck. It's a pretty solid lineup. So let me know what you think of the Boston Calling lineup in the comments below. All right, so let's get to the next topic on the Rock News Roundup podcast, and that is this. Guys, that the Morrison Hotel has burned to the ground. That's right. According to Consequence of Sound, the site of the famous Doors album cover that has been known for years and years, the Morrison Hotel, was destroyed by fire on Boxing Day over the holidays on December the 26th. And the article says that the hotel was vacant for more than a decade. There were squatters who were living in that building over the years, and there were people inside when the flames went up at this location. But fortunately, no one was injured for this fire at the Morrison Hotel. But for those of you who don't know, I'll pop the album cover up here on the screen. The lobby window here at the Morrison Hotel was the famous site of the famous photo for the 5th album from the Doors, Morrison Hotel, which came out back in 1970, and it's one of those famous album covers, right? A lot of people have made the pilgrimage to the Morrison Hotel to take a photo in that particular spot. And then that was obviously a big album for the Doors, more towards the end of their career, with such huge songs like Roadhouse Blues. It had Peace Frog on there, and then one of my favorite Doors tracks from Morrison Hotel, it had Queen of the Highway on there as well, even though I love the demo version of Queen of the Highway more than the studio version of Morrison Hotel. But whatever. So I guess there is a little bit of a story behind the photo and the cover shoot, the photo shoot for Morrison Hotel. And this is coming from this article of Consequence of Sound, talking to the original photographer who recalled getting the band together for this photo shoot. They didn't actually have permission to do this photo shoot in the lobby window of the Morrison Hotel to use for the album cover. So they had to be stealth, and it wouldn't be the first time a rock band has been sneaky to try and get a photo or try to get something that they want. So I guess while the concierge or the lobby manager was away from his desk at the lobby of the hotel, the band kind of just jumped into the window. The photographer took a quick roll of film, took as many shots as he could in succession to get that album cover, and then that's what we resulted with, which was this album cover that is famous for this album from the Doors. And so I've never been to this location in LA, but it's really sad whenever an iconic or older building, some of these landmarks, they fall victim to closure, they fall victim to fire, especially like landmarks that we tie to art or we tie to music or rock or events that we love. Even if we've never been there, if we've never been to those locations, we develop a real attachment to these locations because they're on these iconic album covers that we're staring at as we're listening to this music that is changing our lives. This music that is really just like the music is jumping out of the speakers into our ears or the headphones or wherever. And we're looking at this album cover and we make that connection. It's like even watching a movie, right? If you watch a movie that has a really iconic location in it, even if you've never actually been to that location physically, like you feel like you know it, you feel a connection to it. And I think that's how people probably felt with, the Morrison Hotel, but then you think about other iconic rock landmarks, whether that be Abbey Road, which I've been to a bunch of times. When you go to Liverpool for the Beatles, whether it be the Cavern Club or Penny Lane or Strawberry Fields or John Lennon's house on Menlove Avenue, there's these iconic locations that we've read about, that we've heard about, that we've listened to. Electric Lady Studios in New York City, the site of where Jimi Hendrix made his most famous recordings. Sun Studios in Memphis, where Elvis and a lot of those early rock and roll artists got their start. Like, this is the thing about these locations. These are not just, they're not just places. They are iconic locations that we attach so much meaning to, where all these historic things took place and all these historic things happened. And that's really what's so great about rock fans who can make the pilgrimages to these locations. And I think with a lot of historic buildings, older buildings, a lot of them are getting torn down. A lot of them are getting renovated and becoming something different. You think about CBGB, the famous punk rock club in New York City. I think it's been replaced by a fashion store or something, a shoe store. Could be incorrect about that, but you can let me know in the comments below. But it feels like every cool building eventually just becomes an Apple store or something like that. It really, sometimes there's not much regard for legacy or for history, and that's just the way things go as we progress into the future. It's always got to be about the march of progress, guys. So it doesn't matter if there's certain history. Not to say that they wanted to burn down the Morrison Hotel. I know that, but it's just always. It's always a bummer whenever something like that it becomes derelict or gets burned down or closed down. So who knows if they're going to be doing something with that building to try and honor the album cover for the Doors. It always sucks when we lose the legacy of one of these important buildings. I know it's better than losing everything, losing the whole building. These things can be rebuilt, but I feel like there's really not as many places these days for rock fans to make their pilgrimages to go to these rock locations. Even though there's still a lot of them around, it just feels a little bit sad whenever one of these buildings, it doesn't even have to be attached to music, other historical buildings, other buildings of note, and other buildings of a significant reputation. When we lose them, it feels like we're losing a little bit of history. And I know that we have to be on that march of progress into the future. This is 2025 after all. I totally understand that, but it's just a little bit sad when we lose one of these buildings. So I know that the Morrison Hotel maybe not be as popular as people crossing Abbey Road every day, constantly, all day long, but still a very important part of rock history. Great album as well from the Doors. Lots of great songs on that record. So even though Morrison Hotel itself might not be around, we still have the record. We still have the iconic album cover. And it's sad but it's still an amazing album. So let me know in the comments below what you think of us losing the Morrison Hotel. Have you ever been to the Morrison Hotel? Have you made that pilgrimage to that location? Have you taken a picture there? Let me know if you've been to that location. Let me know what other famous rock landmarks you've been to in the comments below. All right, guys, with that down, let's move on to the next topic here on this edition of the Rock News Roundup podcast, and that is the members of Jane's Addiction are back in the studio recording new music, but this time it's without their frontman, Perry Farrell. Ultimate Classic Rock is reporting that Dave Navarro, Eric Avery, and Stephen Perkins are in the studio without the Jane's Addiction frontman, Perry Farrell. There's some footage that has been seen on Instagram. We've seen footage of them in the studio working on some stuff. Their first studio materials, first recordings since Jane's Addiction released a pair of tracks in 2024. And of course, this is coming on the heels of a lot of drama in the world of Jane's Addiction. They had a very short-lived reunion in 2024, which ended with a huge altercation on stage between Perry Farrell and Dave Navarro. It looked like Perry Farrell was getting very angry in that situation. He had to be dragged off stage. Dave Navarro looked to be very shocked by that whole incident. So this is on the heels of that very short-lived altercation. After that, both parties, Perry Farrell and the other members of Jane's, released some statements, apologizing, saying that the partnership wasn't really going to work at this point in time. And I was listening to this clip on Instagram. It actually sounds pretty cool. From what I hear, it sounds like a more kind of groovy, trippy side of things, more so than the big rock side sound of Jane's Addiction, but without Perry Farrell. Like, is it a Jane's Addiction record? Is it a something else without Perry Farrell record? We don't really know. And that is the thing. We don't really know where Jane's Addiction goes from here, because a continuing Jane's Addiction reunion seems kind of unlikely unless these guys can really figure things out. Not that we know all the aspects of what goes on behind the scenes of a band. It's like any other relationship. That is their own business. That's their own thing, really, to work out. But it seems like something happening with Jane's Addiction, at least this year, is very, very unlikely. Those new songs that we heard back in 2024 were okay. And I'm not a huge Jane's Addiction fan as it is. I like what I've heard of Jane's Addiction, but they're definitely not one of my go-to bands from that 80s and 90s rock era. They're not a Nirvana or a Pearl Jam or a Chili Peppers. At least for me, I know for a lot of other rock fans, they are a lot more important. But for me, I just really not sure what the interest would be for a lot of fans out there without this whole lineup together. I think that was what the interest was, and that was what really drew people to this reunion, is that you had the 4 original members of Jane's Addiction back together. And it just doesn't feel like, it's not something that people really need or are calling for after what happened at the end of 2024. And for me, Jane's Addiction, they're not really a band that have a lot of hits, like a ton of hits, that I would think that they are one of those essential bands from the 90s. Of course, Jane Says, I had a band back in 2002, 2003, a cover band where one of the songs that we played was Jane Says. If a cover band could ever have a one-hit wonder, if there's a cover band that could ever be a one-hit wonder, that's what we were, because we would play so many songs in a set every given night, and then everybody would just say, play Jane Says. For some reason, they loved our cover of that Jane's Addiction song, which I love it. It's a great song. Got kind of annoying trying to cover it all the time. Been Caught Stealing, another great Jane's Addiction song that I love. And then one of the other Jane's Addiction songs that I really do love, and maybe this is cheesy, maybe this isn't really cool of me to say, but Superhero, which came out in 2005 or 2004 on their reunion record, which came out back then. That's 20 years old. And that ended up being the theme song for the television show Entourage. So that just goes to show you kind of what my interest level is for Jane's Addiction, which I do enjoy them. I do have a lot of respect for them. Think they're great musicians. Just like, a reunion didn't really do much for me. Excited that they're back in the studio, because that's what musicians do, right? I know a lot of people say, if you're not going to do Jane's Addiction, if you're not going to do something where it's a reunion, or if it's not nostalgia driven, then why are you still making music? But that is the thing as musicians. We continue to make music no matter what. The drive to make art, the drive to make music is there no matter what brand it has on it, no matter what what fans are necessarily asking for at the time. So it's good that Jane's Addiction is staying busy. I do really think that they should still continue making music, maybe get a new frontman. I don't think fans would be as upset maybe if they got somebody else to sing instead of Perry Farrell. Maybe call it something else. Maybe don't call it Jane's Addiction. But I think another point that I wanted to make about this is that it kind of shows the downside to all the reunions that are happening in the world of rock and the music world in general. That's the thing in the 21st century. If you have a recognizable brand, if you have a recognizable IP, if you have a recognizable name as a musician, you have to follow that, whether it be more nostalgia or be more forward looking. Like, bands are always trying to recapture that magic, trying to go out there and find an audience. Sometimes they fall short and then the fans end up disappointed. So I'm sure there was a lot of Jane's Addiction fans who got very excited about this reunion. We're very excited to go see them live, and then that all fell apart. And then who knows how much enthusiasm there is for a Jane's Addiction reunion or more music from these guys in the near future. But that could just be me. I'm on my own on this, maybe. I'm not sure, but you guys can let me know in the comments. What do you think about this, about Jane's Addiction recording new music without Perry Farrell? Is that like sacrilege that they're doing this without him? Does it make sense that they're going to continue without Perry Farrell and just make music because that's what musicians do? They make music. And how excited are you for any potential new music coming out of this Jane's Addiction camp? You can let me know in the comments below. But the last thing that we're going to get to on this edition of the Rock News Roundup podcast is this week's new releases. 2025 is here. As I mentioned earlier on in the show, I just posted a video up on the YouTube channel about the 2025 rock previewing some of the big releases that are coming out over the next couple of months. But this week, actually, surprisingly enough, for the first big New Music Friday of 2025, we got 3 pretty big new rock releases. And the first one I want to mention is coming this Friday from Scottish rockers Franz Ferdinand. I don't want to do these bad accents. The Human Fear. That wasn't even a Scottish accent. The Human Fear, the new album from Franz Ferdinand, comes out this Friday. That is their 6th studio album. It's their first new album with their new drummer, Audrey Tate. So this is actually their first new album in 7 years since Always Ascending. I can't say I've listened to a ton of Franz Ferdinand over the years. It's been a while since we had new music from them, but I do have a soft spot for them because they were huge when I was in university, when I was in college. They kind of came out in 2004, I believe, with that debut album, would Take Me Out, and that was such a huge hit. Although I wasn't a huge fan of it back then, I do have fond memories of hearing that song and really listening to that record. That first record was great, even though I never really followed the band much after that. But there are some good tracks so far that we've heard from the Human Fear. Audacious, which is the first single, I think that's actually really, really good. It has that kind of spiky, bass-driven Franz Ferdinand kind of verse leading into a really melodic chorus. So Audacious was cool. Night or Day is the other single that we heard from Franz Ferdinand off this new record, The Human Fear. And it's not too bad. So if you like Scottish rock, if you like UK rock, which I know a lot of fans and a lot of viewers here on the channel really do enjoy, the new Franz Ferdinand is out this Friday. And then if you want to go a little bit heavier than Franz Ferdinand, we have the new record from Tremonti, the guitar player from Creed. His new record called The End Will Show Us How is also out this Friday. This is his 6th solo studio album. Mark Tremonti has stayed very, very busy because he got back with the reunited Creed, and they've been doing their thing. They've actually been doing really, really well. Creed have been thriving, going out there and playing shows and just rocking crowds. And then he's been making music with Alter Bridge, which is another great act with Miles Kennedy on lead vocals on that one. They put out a record a couple years ago called Pawns and Kings. And then he's putting out this solo stuff as well. Really, really heavy from what I've heard on this record so far. I've really, really dug it. I know that Wolfgang Wolfgang Van Halen used to be a member of Tremonti, and this album, the songs that I've heard so far, kind of remind me of Mammoth WVH. But there are some good songs on here. The Mother, The Earth, and I, One More Time. I'm not sure if I'm going to review it here on the channel. I'm definitely going to review the new Franz Ferdinand. That's kind of in first position for a rock album review this weekend. But Tremonti might be in there as well. So we'll see. And then taking a look at another final big release in the rock music world coming out this Friday, January the 10th. Ringo Starr, Mr. Richard Starkey, Sir Richard Starkey, Ringo Starr, one of the Beatles. I got the signs over here. I got my discography sign here. The Beatles, not Beatles, Ringo Starr, putting out another solo record this Friday called Look Up. And Ringo has released a lot of music over the last few years. He's released multiple EPs. The most recent one was called Crooked Boy, which came out not too long ago. And that featured production from Linda Perry, who's worked with everybody. It featured guest spots from Nick Valencia of The Strokes, among others. And Ringo, the quality of the music may vary, but I just love that Ringo's still around. The man's 84 years old. He's still making music, and I want him to make music as long as possible. And I'm excited to hear this because he's going back to his country roots. Like Ringo Starr, when he first went solo, back in 1970, after the breakup of the Beatles, he started going back and doing some more country and western standards that he grew up with, and that was on a record called Boku Blues back in 1970. And he's done all sorts of different genres over the years, but I think this is really cool to see Ringo going back and doing some country music. So his new album Look Up comes out this Friday, January the 10th, if you want to check that out. Overall, not a bad start to the year. January tends to be a little bit slow when it comes to new rock releases, but it's great that we got new Franz Ferdinand, their new album, The Human Fear, Tremonti, The End Will Show Us How, and Ringo Starr, Look Up. I'll definitely be reviewing the new Franz Ferdinand on the channel this weekend. Tremonti and Ringo Starr, we'll see, but definitely Franz Ferdinand. So that's a look at your new rock releases coming out for this Friday, New Music Friday, January the 10th. And that is going to be it, guys. That is going to wrap up this edition of the Rock News Roundup podcast. Thank you very much for watching or listening wherever you're checking out this podcast. Let me know in the comments. Let me know on social media what you think of the topics that I talked about on this edition of the show. Let me know if you have any questions or any topics that you want me to talk about on a future edition of the podcast. Let me know in the comments below. If you're on YouTube, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Would really appreciate that, guys. Really appreciate your support and watching the channel. If you're on the audio only version, make sure to give a rating and review. I'd really appreciate that. And make sure to follow me on social media at Nick Chino Music. But that will be it for this edition of the Rock News Roundup podcast. We'll see you guys for another edition next week. Until then, rock on, everybody.